Hello and good evening, everybody. My name's Andy Calvert. I'm the assistant head teacher at Ilkley Grammar School. I'm the designated safeguarding lead, and welcome to our supporting mental health and wellbeing at home session this evening. It's really great for you to join us. We've got today Sally Bishop, our deputy head teacher, myself, Mrs. Hepworth, who's our director of behaviour and outreach. Lorraine Dawson, who is our place to be worker, has also recorded some information for us as well, and most importantly, Mr. Nat Adams, who's our mental health champion. So this evening is all about just engaging with parents in using our Teams Live event. If you've never done a webinar on Teams Live before, just let me give you a few ideas of how it works. There's a Q&A button which you can use. We can monitor that, and we'll do our best to answer those questions either via the Q&A function or at the end. It is slightly delayed this year. We're 15 seconds ahead of you. So again, just please bear with us. If there is a technical fault, we should come back online. Just to give you an overview of where this has come from, obviously our mental health strategy is a part of our safeguarding and pastoral care support plan. It's something that is a big part of our academy development plan. In fact, wellbeing is priority number one on the academy development plan. So it is really important that we engage with the parents and young people to support mental health across the school. And it's been a bit of a journey. Sally will talk about the journey that we've been on recently, but I just wanted you to know from me, as I said many times to many of you, you get unconditional support from a caring, understanding team. The heads of year are part of this team as well, and all the tutors, and in fact all the staff across school to support us all. I've put a few statistics on there for you to see, and I don't want you to be alarmed by that, because actually in a way I'm very, very proud that we've actually got a system that does monitor and identify mental health and well-being issues, and we do everything we can to support those through a number of different mechanisms, which will be highlighted to you this evening. So without ado, I will hand over to Miss Bishop, who will explain a little bit more about how we're doing things. Okay. You're muted, Sally.
I knew that would happen sometime. Good evening, everybody. I'm really pleased that so many of you could join us. We had an unprecedented response to our questionnaire that was sent out. So I just wanted to set the scene for this evening, really, and tell you a little bit about our journey, which started in 2015 when we started collecting student voice, and 47% of students, it was the lowest return on the questionnaire, said that they felt the school didn't properly address mental health and well-being. And as a leadership team, we were absolutely flabbergasted at that and went back to students and said, right, what more can we do? Hence the fact that we introduced pastoral non-teaching heads of year to give more time, and we've slowly changed the structure over the last few years. First of all, introducing Place to Be, which Andy Calvert introduced about 3 years ago now, and ending up with this academic year of being lucky enough to have Nat Adams in place as a mental health champion. So there's lots of work that's going on behind the scenes, lots of training for staff, lots of staff wellbeing groups, lots of discussion about it, and that's really, really important to open up the discussion. So without further ado, you can see there what we've got in terms of our agenda. Those are what you told us you wanted to cover this evening. So I'm going to hand over to Mr. Adams, who has had training in this area and is very knowledgeable. Thank you, Nat.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. We're really hoping that you'll get a lot out of this session. And I thought maybe what we could do was to start talking a little bit about what's going on with our teenagers. Some of you may be well versed in raising teenagers. Some of you might be experiencing teenagers for the first time, and they can seem a bit like a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. And I thought it would help us to maybe understand a little bit more about maybe what's going on from their perspective. you know, there has never probably been a time when it has been more challenging to be a teenager. There is so much for them to process in their everyday lives. We've got, you know, a head full of these sort of things. But on top of that, you know, they have, you know, challenges in their friendship groups. They have family commitments to honor. They have pressures in school day to day. And they may be having, you know, struggling to form their own identity in amongst all that. Social media in the last 10 years is a very new pressure to the teenager, where they are constantly being bombarded with, you know, images and pressures and wanting to, you know, meet up to some of their sort of peers. We've also then got maybe other commitments going on outside school. Sort of images with, you know, sort of conflicts with body image or things like that happening. But actually, what's really interesting to find out more about is, you know, is getting them to understand what we mean by mental health. And the idea is that every single one of us has mental health, and sometimes that can be good and sometimes that can be poor. And what we can see is that that can fluctuate up and down a spectrum, somewhere between, you know, 1 and 10. And everybody experiences mental health differently, and it's different at different periods of time in our lives. Environmental factors can lead to different emotional responses. You know, if someone's going through a very difficult time, or if they're struggling with friendship groups, that can affect the emotional response that somebody is feeling at that time. Now, at the same time, there is no point in comparing emotional responses, because we all react differently to things. And if someone was to come in and say that they didn't like our hair, what some of us might go, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I agree. It's not a great haircut. Others of us might go, you know, really take that personally and get very upset about it. And everybody's emotional response is different. I suppose the key thing to understand is that emotions are transient. They don't last. They come and go. And the key thing is that we can be proactive in promoting good mental health and achieving positive states of well-being. And kind of what I want to talk to you today about is giving you lots of strategies. That's what we've been setting out to do in school this year, is to give our kids an arsenal of strategies and techniques that they can try in their everyday lives to bring about that really great emotional response. But another thing that's really important, I think, for us to understand is what is happening to our kids' adolescent, you know, brains. You know, academically, their brain is like for like that of an adult. They are perfectly academically capable, you know, as anybody who is, you know, moved out of this stage. However, emotionally, they are going through something very, very different. The graph on the bottom is the one I'd like to draw your attention to. So the blue line that you see starting from about 2 going up past 25 is the serotonin levels in the adolescent brain. Now, serotonin is a key hormone here. It stabilizes our mood. It helps with feelings of well-being and happiness. And it's a very key regulator in sort of controlling the executive control over our moods. And what happens is that serotonin level, that regulator, improves at a pretty steady level all up until the age of about 25. Now, the red line is the actual clincher here, is that this is the levels of dopamine that we experience as we move through these ages. And what you can see between the ages of 15 and about 18 is there is a massive surge in dopamine. Okay, and the dopamine figures, just what we're seeing here is dopamine is a way of controlling you know, our sort of stresses. What happens when there's this massive surge of dopamine is there is a massive drive to seek reward, and that reward is massive for our kids. They're constantly seeking it. Now, unfortunately, sometimes the places they seek these rewards are what we call quick fixes. It's things like maybe likes on social media. It's things like views on TikTok that are very short and snappy hits of dopamine that make them feel very great, but they're not long lasting. And the thing is, the next time that quick dopamine hit is not there, it can make them start to feel a bit withdrawn and not, getting that hit of dopamine that they're looking for. Dopamine will eventually sort of curve down, but this dopamine is really sort of encouraging our kids to take risks, to form their identity, to sort of push back against, control or authority because they want to do more things for themselves. But that surge of dopamine, that lack of regulation, can really lead to some mental health issues down the line and some well-being issues down the line. And we kind of want to, talk a little bit more about that. So the key thing is that in that period of time, our kids need emotional growth. They need the opportunity and the space to deal with emotions and moods. There's a very interesting video moving around social media at the moment of a dad who is sitting there while his 2-year-old toddler is having a tantrum. And he sits there very calmly, he doesn't talk, and he lets that toddler completely cry herself out to deal with those difficult emotions that she is feeling. And when she has kind of dealt with those emotions, when she's finally cried it out, that's when she gets a hug, and they can talk it out. The key thing for our teenagers is that we acknowledge and recognize when they are feeling difficult emotions and difficult feelings. It's very easy for us to sort of pick up on the bad behavior or the negative behavior that comes sometimes from bad emotions and feelings. But for them, what they kind of need is a separating the emotions from the behavior. If the behavior is challenging or it's upsetting for us or for siblings, if we can separate the behavior from the emotions, we can actually respond to and support our kids when they are feeling these difficult emotions and feelings. So the idea is, when they are feeling these difficult emotions and feelings, if we can give them the space to calm down, to process those, the key time to talk about that is when those emotions or those moods have passed. That's probably the key time to encourage reflection and maybe talk about strategies and coping methods to help in the future. Now, I just kind of at this point want to just draw a line here between something, like mental health and what we call mental health disorders. As I've said, mental health is a level of psychological well-being. It can appear on a spectrum between good and sadness. It can fluctuate, and it can fluctuate several times a day, several times a week. But as we've already said, teenagers, because of this dopamine, are probably moving up and down this scale an awful lot more. And that is pretty natural. That's just part of this process of adolescence. There is a line then when we can, where we can separate mental health and the regular mental health we feel to something called a mental health disorder. Now, for the most part, at this stage, what most of our teenagers are dealing with is just the mental health, the ups and downs. A mental health disorder, I'm not a big fan of the word disorder, but that's kind of the clinical term at the moment, is a little bit something more. It might be a genetic condition. It might mean that there is something more where that making our students struggle a little bit more with external factors. Sometimes we'll talk a little bit about depression later, but sometimes, mental health or poor mental health can move into depression, so it might move slightly into the right. There might be anxiety disorders, schizophrenia, bipolar. The key thing is that none of us are trained professionals in terms of diagnosis and things like this. When it gets to that sort of level, the key person at that point is going to be our GP. And we'll talk more a little bit about that as we move through the presentation. So let's talk a little bit then about talking about mental health at home. The key thing, I suppose, here is creating the opportunity to talk. Now, again, what's happening with our students in this dopamine is that, they're pushing back. if they feel that we are kind of addressing things with them directly, they might see that as being targeted. But there are ways kind of around that. If as part of like family time, we have opportunities like sitting around the dinner table, talking about our day, everybody talking about it collectively, it kind of lowers the temperature a bit. And having that sort of regular time in, no distractions to talk, can kind of help our kids process what's been going on in their day. If you're feeling that maybe, you know, some of our kids are not kind of, you know, they don't really want to talk, there may be ways that we can approach that. It might, you know, think of an opener, you know, saying, you know, you don't seem yourself today. Would you like to talk about anything? You know, or you seem sad or worried. Do you want to have a chat about it? Is there anything I can do to help? You said earlier that you said something earlier, and I wondered how you felt about that. How do you feel about it now? And those sort of openers can take the temperature off and encourage dialogue. And I suppose that's it, encouraging and creating the opportunity for kids to talk. Now, the key thing is that they may not want to talk to us. And again, that's probably a little bit at this stage of what's happening in their development. And if they don't want to talk to us at that moment in time, that's fine. They might still be processing things, but encouraging them and making sure they realize that you are there if and when they want to talk, and presenting them the opportunity regularly can really help when they do feel ready. And again, when they do talk, it's important to sort of try and stay calm and acknowledge their feelings. That's the big thing, is because they're feeling these difficult things, they need to understand that what they are feeling and what they are going through is pretty normal as part of their development. And again, the key thing, I suppose, is to let them talk it out. Let them tire themselves out talking and telling you how they're feeling. Maybe don't try and diagnose or second guess their feelings. Just let them share as much or as little as they want to. You know, you can support the dialogue with open-ended questions. So you could say things like, well, how did that make you feel? What was that emotion like? How, you know, when that happened, what was the outcome? And open-ended questions can encourage dialogue further. And the key thing, I suppose, is to when those discussions are happening, is to offer support and promote self-care. So, you know, in terms of, you know, the other thing we've got to kind of understand is that at times some emotions don't necessarily move on. So I'm just going to show you this again. This scale of 1 to 10 is something that we've introduced quite a lot in school this year, because there's a lot of power in this. If we're looking at, you know, at kids and going, how are you feeling? You know, they don't see themselves. A good indicator, a good sort of tell, can be saying to them, where are you on a scale of 1 to 10? 1, you know, being low, 5 being okay and you know, just steady, 10 being absolutely amazing. And asking them that, where are you on this scale, can be a big tell. You know, they might say, oh, I'm a 3. And you know, that might just be part of the spectrum of them going up and down this scale. But you can then say things like, well, how long have you felt like that? How long have you been a 3? They might say, well, do you know what, a couple of days, but you know, I was a 7 a couple of days ago. And that kind of makes you think, yep, we're moving up and down the spectrum, that's okay. You know, if they're turning around and saying, I'm a 2 and I've been like that for a while, that can then generate another conversation saying, well, look, is there anything we could do to improve that emotional response? Is there anything we could maybe do together as a family or as a group to try and help that? I suppose the key thing we've got to realize about teenagers is teenagers want to be a 10, and that's where they want to be all the time. And anything less is you know, they're not happy. As we get older, you know, I'm pretty happy with a 5 most days. 5 is pretty much steady for me. If I'm 5 at that's pretty good for me. But that kind of takes a lot of life experience to figure out, and that's what our kids are doing. The difficulty we've got is that as adults and with more life experience, we can see the quick fixes. We can see what our kids need to do to fix things and make them better. But the difficulty comes in that sometimes when we make those suggestions, they're not very responsive to the suggestions. And I suppose that's kind of where, if we have this arsenal ready, of great strategies and techniques that we can talk our kids through those or present them to them at various times. So the key thing, again, with emotional responses is that everybody has a different emotional response. So when our students are saying, or they're a 2 or a 3, what might be a 3 for you might be something lower or higher for them. And the key thing is there's no point in comparing our emotional responses to our teenagers because, again, of this massive surge of dopamine. But what we can try and understand is that emotions are transient. They're not going to last. Sometimes when we are suffering from poor mental health, we can forget this, and we can stop and remind ourselves that, I might be feeling this emotion now, but it eventually will pass. The key thing, I suppose, as well to say here is that sometimes when we're looking at this last point, is there anything we can do to improve things? Sometimes there isn't. Sometimes what our kids are going through is a very tough thing. It might be a bereavement. And that means that, unfortunately, with something that challenging, it is going to take longer to process those emotions and feelings. But the idea, again, is them not feeling alone, them feeling understood, them feeling that we're all in this together can be really supportive. So let's talk then probably here, because actually prevention is much better than the cure. And what we've spent a lot of time doing this year is promoting self-care with our students. So I'm just going to talk through a little bit about that. The key thing about self-care is regular practice. We have this thing where we say 15 minutes of self-care is 1% of your day. And yes, it might be that, we would like to sort of say to our kids, yeah, you should be practicing self-care, but actually self-care is, they might not, rather than those quick fixes, those things that take longer or are faster or harder won actually have more sustained and released dopamine. And actually that's kind of why we've done a lot on this this year. The other thing to say is, building time in as a family for self-care can make it feel less targeted. It might be, for example, that we try doing self-care as a family together. In Denmark, they have this system, and also some other Scandinavian countries, they have this system of hygge. And hygge is family time. It's built in. It's such a routine in Danish culture that at a particular time every evening, screens are put away, phones are put away. They come together as a family. They play board games. They read, and because it's a whole group activity, teenagers don't feel necessarily targeted in it because everybody's doing it together. So sometimes like family self-care can be a really positive way to build in those routines with our teenagers. So there are kind of 4 self-care strategies that we've been working at: the physical, the emotional, the social, and the practical. We did an online well-being week, the third week back in January. And what we did was we presented our students with these self-care menus. And we basically said to them, try one on this day. Sign yourself up and try one of these things today. So, in terms of practical, that's helping them to organize themselves. It's helping them to, to help process the busy lives that they have with school and family and things like this. So again, these are some of the strategies that we've worked at. These strategies, I'll show you and signpost where you can find these strategies at the end of the presentation, because they're still available to all our students. So the other thing that we've talked about is social strategies. Now the difficulty with this obviously is at the moment the pressures of lockdown is an additional pressure that our teenagers are going through. So again, even though they might not be able to meet their friends regularly, there were lots of ways that they can still, touch base with their friends. So again, these were some of the strategies that we suggested and tried to encourage them to buy into. The other self-care strategy was about managing their emotions. And again, if they're struggling with all these emotions, there are a lot of things that they can do. Keeping a journal and writing down their thoughts and emotions is a really good way to process and to sort of work through those things. And keeping it positive, at the end of the day, writing down the 3 best things that happened. Meditation and quiet time is honestly a really big strength. I've done a lot of meditation sessions with students before over the years, and it is, and with staff, and it is one of those things that if you can build it into your time regularly, it's really great. I've got a lot of apps and things. I'll talk about meditation and things like that later when we talk about sleep, but there's a lot of support with that. Listening to music can be very calming in terms of emotion. Reading, we say there's no better way to get out of your head than to get into somebody else's head through a book. Relaxing, keeping a gratitude diary, being creative, which we'll talk more about in a little while. And then lots of physical stuff that they can be doing as well, because we know what the sort of being physical can do in terms of boosting that serotonin regulator there as well. So we also have been trying to encourage them in the last little while. Particularly yesterday, we finished school period 5, or lessons finished period 5, and we invited them period 5 to take a screen break, to do something that didn't involve a screen. And again, this is a really good thing to encourage. Now, at the same time, I've had conversations with teenagers who've said the idea of putting down their mobile phone would be more detrimental to their mental health than putting, than actually having it. It's one of those ones that, I think a lot of our teenagers are very reliant on their phones and their iPads and things, but just trying to get them to do a different activity that doesn't rely on a screen, even for 15 minutes, half an hour, can have a real benefit and a real boost to their mental health. Before I move on to this section, we'd just like to say as well, if you've got any questions, if you put them into the question and answer session, we can come back to those and respond to those. But what I'd like to do is talk you through a little bit about anxiety, depression, and panic attacks, and how we can support with those in school and at home. So I'm just going to talk a little bit I teach philosophy of mind, so this is like a big thing for me. I was going to talk to you a little bit about the work of Roger W. Sperry, who was a psychobiologist and Nobel Prize winner, and he basically talked a lot about the different hemispheres of the brain. And what's really interesting is, what happens. Predominantly, we have a left-hand side and a right-hand side of the brain that normally do the same thing. Sometimes there's switch lateralization where, we might have some people whose left-hand side of the brain operates on the right or vice versa. But what we would see in the left-hand side of the brain is that's the side of the brain that processes things, the verbal side, the speech, the language, the analyzing, the communication, the reading and the writing. Now it's more complicated when we break it down, but in terms of lateralization, that's what we would see. On the right, what happens on the right-hand side of the brain is we have emotional processing, we have imagination, holistic thinking, intuition, arts, rhythm, non-verbal cues, feelings, visualizations, daydreaming. But what's really interesting about the different sides of the brain is that they control different sides of the body. So the left-hand side of the brain controls the right-hand side of the body, and the right-hand side of the brain controls the left. So what we've got connecting these two sides of the brain is something called the corpus callosum, which is a series of nerve fibers that connects the two. Information is constantly passing from the left to the right, and they are working together in tandem to deal with everything. Now, what's very interesting is the work of Michael Gazzaniga. He worked with patients who didn't have a corpus callosum, didn't have those nerve fibers connecting, either because there was some sort of agenesis where the corpus callosum, those nerve fibers didn't develop, but actually what was happening in the 70s was they were sometimes severing the corpus callosum in patients who had severe epilepsy to stop that sort of electrochemical reaction that was happening in epilepsy. And it's not a very common treatment now, but Gazzaniga did a lot of work on patients who didn't have this this connection. And one of the experiments he did was he presented each side of the brain with a different picture. So the right-hand side of the brain was presented a picture of a snow scene through the left eye. And the left-hand side of the brain was presented a picture of a chicken through the right eye. And what they had to do, what they were asked to do, each side of the brain, was to find a picture that corresponded with their picture. So this was pretty easy for the left-hand side of the brain. There were all these cards in front, and it was able to verbally say, the chicken foot matches the chicken. They asked the right-hand side of the brain which picture matched the snow scene, and although the right-hand side of the brain isn't responsible for speech, a hand went out and grabbed the picture of the snow shovel. What then happened is quite amazing, because what they did was they asked the left-hand side of the brain, why did the right-hand side of the brain choose the snow shovel? And what's remarkable is the left-hand side of the brain was getting no information from the right, so it didn't know. So what it did was it made it up. And it said the reason that side of the brain chose the snow shovel was to clean out the chicken coop. And in every single patient, in every single time they performed this experiment, the left-hand side of the brain made it up. Now, what does this tell us? It tells us that the left-hand side of the brain is constantly trying to interpret the world around it. And if it can't do that, if it can't figure it out, it's going to try and fill in the gaps. And this means that a lot of what we interpret about reality and what's happening in the world is our own perception and might not necessarily be the way things really are, because perception's subjective and will vary from person to person. But the need to interpret shows that the left-hand side of the brain is always active and always telling us what we need to know. Now, that was very useful when it comes to this. So the amygdala is a section of the brain that is responsible for fight or flight. And that was very useful. So basically, when we encountered a bear, we were going, right, I now need to, the whole rest of the brain would shut down, and quickly the amygdala would go, fight or flight. Are we going to fight this bear, or are we going to run away from the bear? And odds are I would look and go, I'm not going to take on that bear, and I would run and escape. And that was really useful. The thing is that the amygdala still doesn't have the sort of threats that we used to. So what it does is it just fires up every now and then to see that we're still there, that we're still ready. And the problem is now that we are perceiving threats. So that could be stresses with exams, that could be lots of different things. And what can then happen is, occasionally it will flare up. And the left-hand side of the brain will go, danger! And the example here would be, in terms of, and Sally's going to talk to you in a minute about panic attacks, but my personal experience, I had one when I was 27. I was mopping the floor, and I was on the floor, couldn't breathe, felt like I was having a heart attack, and my brain was going, is there a bear? And I was going, no, there's no bear. And then I was looking around, trying to find something for what was happening to me. And the best that my left-hand side of the brain could come up with was that the detergent I was using in the water, which I'd used many times before and have used many times since, was poisoning me. And that's what the left-hand side of the brain came up with. That's what I thought for a very long period of time, because it was the best that they could do. There are lots of ways that we can calm down that panic and anxiety attack, which we'll talk about more in a minute, but I'm just going to pass you over to Sally. Sally, do you want to, can you, can you hear?
Yeah. Andy, I'll just. Okay,
no,
and I've managed to actually get my microphone on this time. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Adams. Right, so the bear analogy is a really interesting one for me, because as many of you will know, I'm a very, very keen mountain biker. And about 4 years ago, I went on a mountain bike holiday with my husband to California. in America, and spent actually quite a lot of the time on very, very remote tracks, going very steeply downhill, with a very real threat of bears. And my awareness was just heightened the whole time I was there, and I had such a lot to deal with. But interestingly, it wasn't at the time that really affected me, because on the plane, on the way home, on the airplane, I was just watching a particular film and decided to, after that film, to go to sleep. And I got about 20 minutes of sleep and then suddenly woke up and felt as if on the plane, the whole plane was just, I can't really describe it, because as soon as I'm talking about it, it kind of generates those feelings again. But it felt as if everything was coming in on me. And genuinely, I was so scared. I knew there wasn't a bear, but I got up and I tried to get out of that plane, and I tried to open that door. And obviously that's a massive issue on a plane, but I could not, for the life of me, work out what was going on and work out why I was so scared on that plane. I'm not afraid of flying. I used to fly all the time. And that was my first experience of a panic attack, because that's really scary. You stop breathing, you hyperventilate, you breathe very, very quickly, therefore you get very dizzy. And actually I had to go to the airplane toilet and had to put the light on and had to just put myself in a different environment, but it took about half an hour to calm me down. And as you can imagine, it was incredibly frightening having one of those on an aeroplane. But I'm telling that story really to say it can happen to anyone at any time. I've never had a panic attack in my life until 4 years ago, and then suddenly at some weird moment it happened for no logical reason. That's my experience. Over to you, Nat.
Thank you. Can you hear me again?
Yeah.
Good. So there's actually lots we can do. If the left-hand side of the brain is going danger, danger, and there isn't really any danger, what we can do is we can try and use more things to do with the right-hand side of the brain to calm the left-hand side of the brain down. One technique that's really useful for panic attacks, well, actually, what I'll do is I'll move on to the next slide. The next slide talks to you about maybe what the signs of a panic attack are. It could be nausea, it could be chills or hot flashes, it could be sweating, trembling or shaking, numbness and tingling, dizziness, hyperventilation, and very quick heartbeat. And a lot of people who have panic attacks for the first time think they're having a heart attack because their heart is going and they're struggling to breathe. Now, the key thing is there is lots you can do if your child is having a panic attack. The first thing is that they may not be aware that they're having a panic attack. It could be for the first time, or it might be, you know, several times. This might have happened a couple of times. The first thing to do is to try and get them comfortable. That might be getting them sat on the floor. It might be putting their head between their knees, if whatever's comfortable. I suppose the other thing then is they need to feel that they're not alone. So again, if you sit down beside them, and then there's somebody close by, that can be really comforting. At the same time, the best thing to do during a panic attack is not to crowd them. Very often, if we have a student in school who's having a panic attack, the idea is we clear the decks. We don't want lots of people or lots of staff standing around them, because that's going to just add to the panic and the anxiety. So again, if one or two people can support somebody with a panic attack, that's probably a good number of people. So back to this using the right-hand side of the brain. As we talked about, the right-hand side of the brain is responsible for colours. A really good and calming thing is just to look around the room and get them to call out the colours that they see. And they can go around the room again and again, just going green, blue, red, yellow, green, blue, red, yellow, and just identifying the colours. It pulls them back into the room. It gets them to focus on something, but it's focusing on the right-hand side of the brain. Now, we know breath is regulated by the right-hand side of the brain. So again, focusing on breathing is a really good thing during a panic attack. There's a really good system. Sometimes it has different numbers. Sometimes it's, I've heard it's 5, 6, 7. Sometimes I've heard it's 6, 7, 8. But the idea is breathing in for 5 seconds, holding it for 6, and then breathing out slowly for 8. really what that does is it slows the breath down, it slows the heartbeat down, and eventually will have calming influence and hopefully help ease the panic attack. So again, breathing in for 5, holding it for 6, and breathing out for 7 or 5, 6, 7, 8, whichever works. But that's something you can actually do with them. If you do that with them, again, it's helping them to work through that. The other thing that's quite good is something called a mantra. Now, this is a technique I'm going to talk a little bit more about in sleep, but it really is another one that works very, very well. And what we would say, it was part of a sleep thing that I'd found out about, where an expert was saying, if you wake up in the middle of the night and you cannot get back to sleep, the reason that you can't very often is because there's a cycle of thought that's just going and it will not stop, and you're stuck on that cycle of thought. The left-hand side of your brain is very busy. This method is that you choose a non-emotive word, like the word the, and you repeat it over and over again. But the key is you don't repeat it at regular intervals, you repeat it at irregular intervals. So you go the, and what you're doing actually is you're creating a beat or a rhythm. And the rhythm is very much doing the right-hand side of the brain. And the key thing with these calling the colors, with the breathing, with that mantra of the, is you just do it until the panic attack passes, until the breathing calms down. And there's some really good strategies that I have seen work time and time again when it comes to panic attacks. So I'd like to talk just a little bit then about depression. So we've talked about this spectrum of our kids moving up and down this scale and what that's like with all this dopamine and the challenges that they're facing. But the key thing is that it is pretty normal to feel stresses. It's pretty normal to feel anxiety. It's something everybody feels, and it's definitely normal to feel low mood during difficult times. And low mood very often improves after a short period of time. And it might not be a low mood for a week or a little bit longer or 2 weeks, might not be a sign of depression. It might just be this emotional roller coaster that our kids are on as they move through adolescence. Now, the symptoms of depression, though, can range from mild to severe. It can be unhappiness, but what we would often hear more is this sort of despair or this hopelessness. They lose interest in things around them, things they might enjoy. They might feel very tearful. And many people with depression also have symptoms of anxiety, but we need to be clear that having anxiety doesn't necessarily link to depression. There can obviously be physical symptoms for depression, and unfortunately those are sometimes the polar opposites. You know, it might be that they're eating more or they're eating less. They might be sleeping more, they might be sleeping less. But what we would say at this point is if somebody has had a low mood or this prolonged period of anxiety, or and it's going on for like 5, 6 plus weeks, that's probably the time to speak to the GP, because the GP at that point is the trained professional who will be able to give better guidance at this point. If things reach that stage and you think, yeah, we do need to speak to the GP, what I would say here is it's really key that when our students and when our kids are feeling, when they're struggling, rather than stepping in, rather than going, I know how to fix this, what we do is we encourage them, we empower them, and we present them options. So again, when we're talking about all these things, it's saying, getting them to talk, asking them to come up with things that they think might help. And if they're struggling, say, well, what about this as an option, or this is an option, and present them with 3 or 4 options and see if they take them. If they don't take them, that's fine. But again, keep encouraging, keep empowering, because encouraging them to make the decisions is really going to help them build the resilience that we really want to see in our kids. And I want to talk a little bit about the benefits of sleep, because honestly, this is probably one of the best things that happen. And so sleep, the reason sleep is so important is that the process of sleep helps people deal with feelings and emotions and things that have happened in the day, and it almost resets what's happening. And not always, but it's a very good tool to help reset those things. Now, what we can see is this is from the National Sleep Foundation. They're recommending that 14 to 17-year-olds get, on average, about 8 to 10 hours. Now, that's not a challenge. There's nothing wrong if they get a little bit more and get a little less. And as we know, sleep varies. Sometimes we will have a very restful night and not sleep very well, and we might be a bit tired, and that will affect our mood the next day. But what will normally happen is over the next couple of nights, we will catch up with the sleep that we have missed, and we will adjust. But you know, sleep is really important to the adolescent brain. It helps with that regulation, and really it's very key. Now, of course, the difficulty is that when we have mental health issues, it can affect our sleep. It can affect, you know, it can lead to things like insomnia. It can lead to, and there's different types of insomnia. There's insomnia of going to bed and not getting to sleep, or sometimes, like I was talking about, waking up at 2 in the morning with our heads racing with lots of things, left-hand side of the brain chattering away, and not being able to get back to sleep. Now, in terms of there's a lot we can do in terms of sleep hygiene. Now, the sleep clinic in London say that the best way to deal with insomnia is actually regular bedtimes and having this going to bed at the same time and getting up at the same time. There's a lot. What sleep clinic do is they do a lot of things where basically what they try and get people to do is to go to bed at the same time and get up. No matter how you've slept, go to that bed at that time, get up at that time. Don't nap in the afternoon. But what they say after about 3 weeks of going to bed at the same time and getting up at the same time is that the sleep clock resets itself. And what will happen is sleep will happen between those hours of whatever time you go to bed. But that is quite a hard process, but a really productive one. The other thing is obviously blue lights and screens. And this is a difficult one because, you know, I can be very bad for myself getting into bed and just looking at the screen. And I know Apple and various other technologies have tried to limit this. They've put in sort of like softer lights and things, but actually the level of blue light still coming through is going to be enough to keep people awake. Basically what's happening is around this time, our brains are being flooded with melatonin, which is the chemical that's going to get us to sleep. The problem is when we look at blue light, it basically is sending the message to our brains that it's daytime, and it kind of conflicts with that melatonin. So actually having a screen break before bed is a really good way to encourage sleep happening. In terms of you know, temperatures in bedrooms, it's advised that they say that it's much a better sleep climate is a cooler bedroom rather than a warmer bedroom. Reading before bed, again, is a really good way to calm the left-hand side of the brain down by getting it to focus a little bit. And baths and showers before bed, again, can be a really good thing for inducing sleep, because what happens is the body temperature rises and then immediately it starts to cool down, which helps induce sleep. And the other thing that can be really useful is a tidy space to sleep in. And that can really help in terms of psychologically when you go to bed. The difficulty as well might be that some of our kids might be using their bedroom to do their work and their screens and their laptops or their iPads. It's often quite a good thing to try and at the end of the day, maybe with their remote learning, to put the technology away, or as best they can to put it away, so they're claiming the bedroom back as their sleeping space. And psychologically, that can be a really beneficial thing in terms of sleep. I just want to quickly draw your attention now to some of the great resources that we've been working on with our students, so that you and you also will have access to these things. And we put together an interactive student mental health and wellbeing handbook. It's about 14 pages, and it's a PDF that we've invited students to save onto their iPads, ready to access if and when they need it. It's hyperlinked throughout. There are strategies on self-care with links to different advice and different things. There is this little thing on the right which you'll be able to see, and what these are little booklets from the Mental Health Foundation that if our students click on them, they'll open them up and see them as a PDF. But there's ones on looking after your mental health, managing and reducing stress, overcoming fear and anxiety, looking after your mental health using mindfulness, looking after your health using exercise, and how to sleep better. For adults, they have some for adults and looking after your mental health later in life as well. But this booklet is kind of the go-to place where we would suggest, starting in terms of looking for solutions, empowering your kids to go, look, you're struggling right now. Let's get this booklet out. Let's look at some of these strategies and see if you think any of them will work. What we've tried to do is give them so many strategies that there are lots to choose from. The key thing that we've been trying to sort of encourage this year is that sometimes these things we'll look at them and go, that's definitely not for me. And if that's fine, just move on, choose a different one. What we also know is that sometimes these things can work, and the next time we go to them, they don't work. And the key thing then is if you've been trying, exercise or something like that, and sometimes you go out for a run and it doesn't work, your head is still busy, don't just give up, don't stop trying running, try something else. Try another one of these strategies or these techniques. Where you'll find this is every student at Ilkley Grammar School has access to the personal development folders. Now, there's lots in these personal development folders, but one of the things we've created is a guide to well-being, and they can access this on their Shobi accounts. All parents have access to this folder too. But basically, what they do is in here, there's a little folder they can access the student mental health handbooklet. We've got all the self-care menus we showed you earlier. All those how-to guides are in there. But also, we're continually adding to this. I'm going to talk to you now about 2 apps that I think are really useful for supporting students with their mental health. Those are the Kooth apps and the Think Ninja apps. I'll start with Think Ninja. Think Ninja is a really great app. Both these apps are free to download. The Think Ninja app even has components about COVID if kids are feeling anxious about that. But what Think Ninja does is it's a fully self-automated app. So it asks kids, how are you feeling right now? And the kids tell Think Ninja what they're feeling. And what Think Ninja does is it is specifically applying cognitive behavior therapy techniques to tackle low mood, negative thinking, and low-level depression. And what it does is it will offer suggestions, strategies. It will try and tackle negative thinking and look at different alternatives to look at those things. It's free. A lot of our students are finding it really, really useful. They can download it to their phones, and it's a really great app. The other app is called Kooth. Kooth is an online app that has lots of different features, but one of the key features is it has 24-hour-a-day access to online counselors through chat. It's a really good thing that if our kids are struggling to talk to us yet because they're working through things, they can work things through with a counsellor on the app, and then when they're kind of processing and ready, come back and talk to us. There are lots of forums in there offering advice. I think there's a journaling function as well, and there are live moderated forums. So it's a really useful app, and ones that both us and Place to Be would advocate. So on that note, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share with you a video that our Place to Be counsellor Lorraine has put together. So if you just bear with me a second, here we go, and hopefully you will hear and see this. Can you see that? I'm hoping so. Here we go.
Hello everybody, my name's Lorraine Dawson and I'm the school project manager for Place to Be at Ilkley Grammar School. I'm in school Monday to Friday, and we also have a team of up to 8 counsellors that come in across the week. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the services we offer in school, and the first one I want to say about is Place to Talk. So this is a service that's available to all the students in school across all the year groups, and it's a self-referral service. They can email me directly. My contact details will be on a slide at the end of Mr. Adams' presentation. So Place to Talk is a 15-minute confidential appointment. It's where the students can talk about what they're struggling with and how they're managing with that struggle at the moment, and we can explore together possible other ways that they can manage the situation, that they can deal with whatever they're finding difficult. And I can also refer them to other sources of support that might help them, such as apps, websites, or maybe external services. Sometimes from Place to Talk appointments, it can become apparent that the students do need counselling, and this is where we lead on to our Place to Be a service, which is the counselling service in school. This is where students can access the service up to 10 sessions, and that's on a weekly basis. Because the students have timetables week A and week B, they never miss the same lesson, and I do work with them to work out whether, you know, a certain slot might be useful for them, or whether that's going to clash with something that they don't want to miss. It's really important that they want to engage with counselling.
So I'm just going to swap back to my presentation, and I'm going to pass you over to Ms. Hepworth. Here we go.
Hopefully you can see me and hear me now. Good evening, everybody. My name's V. Hepworth. I am the Director of Behaviour, Attendance and Outreach at Ilkley Grammar School, as Sally said at the start. And I'm also an Assistant Safeguarding Lead and work closely with Andy and Sally around safeguarding our young people. I think the most important part of my role to talk about this evening is the outreach side of my work. And what my job really is to look at the holistic approach to problems and provide support not only to our young people, but also to the wider families as well. You know, and especially in times like we're currently enduring with lockdown, it heightens all the issues within the family homes, because we are spending a lot of time together, and that just makes things a little bit more difficult for us all to deal with. A little bit about me. Prior to coming to IGS 7 years ago now, I was in the police for 30 years. Most of my work was working around safeguarding, child protection, domestic violence and hate crime. So I've built up a wealth of experience in the multi-agency approach to problem solving, and introducing sort of the voluntary sector, third sector organisations, as well as working with statutory agencies. It's about having a partnership approach to try and help and support, as I say, not only our young people, but also the families as well. So I can utilise my experience to signpost in all sorts of different areas, whether that be things like drugs and alcohol problems, as I said, domestic abuse, bereavement, all those kind of things. I can provide the interface together with the pastoral teams to make sure that we do kind of have a wraparound approach to the problems that people are facing. Obviously, we have a fantastic pastoral team. We've got some great heads of year, and they are supported by the student support managers, and we work very closely with the students. But nobody knows the students quite as well as you do as parents and carers. So it's really important that we try and keep the dialogue going between ourselves, particularly if you at home notice little things about what might be happening with your young people, some things that might be out of the ordinary but might seem quite small to you. I think it would be really helpful if you could raise those with us so that we can perhaps monitor a little bit more closely what we see in school. It might try and piece things together. So the bottom line is really that we should work together as a school in partnership with yourselves and with our young people to try and get our selves through these problems, really. So if you need to speak to me at all, obviously you can contact me through school, either by email or by phone. Okay, Nat, back to you.
Thank you very much. The other thing I'd just like to draw your attention to is on the school website, in the Parents tab, we have a mental health and wellbeing tab, and as part of that, what we've put together is a mental health directory. That links lots of different sort of apps that might be helpful. So, for example, in the Better Sleep app, we talk about Calms, which has sort of different sleep sounds. There's various sort of podcasts and things that might be useful. So again, this is a really good go-to place if there's something specific that you want help with. Regarding mental health and well-being with your kids, and this is constantly being added to. So you know, we just wanted to signpost it and say it's there if you need any more support as well. So again, I think we're just going to finish up now, but just to sort of pick up again on what Via's saying. You know, you do know your kids better than anyone, and sometimes even possibly better than themselves. And there is kind of this great balancing act of trying to, you know, support, but give them that chance for emotional growth and to, you know, to let them process and deal with these emotions and feelings that they're going through. But what we would say is, you know, we say this a lot in school. It's, you know, apply your own oxygen mask first. Because actually, in looking after your own mental health and well-being, it has a really, you know, great impact on the young people around us. In school, we know that when our mental health and well-being is really great, we can feel it in lessons and things like this with the kids around us. And likewise, you know, it's very important that we all look after ourselves, you know, before and during supporting students, I suppose, or kids. You know, a lot of these strategies we've put across today, they're not age specific. They can be used by anybody. And, you know, again, if you look and think, you know, actually, that sounds really good, give it a go and see how we get on. I'm going to pass you back, I think, to Andy now. And I think we might have some Q&A. Is that right? I think you're muted, Mr. Calvert.
Being muted is the bane of my life at the minute. You're on mute, Mr. Calvert. I don't know how many times I've heard that. Listen, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody that has attended this evening. I think at peak there was 90 families online with us here, which is great to see. And I just wanted to say thank you to Nat and Sally and V for what they've said to everyone this evening. I think it's always our intention to be as honest as we can be with you all. You know, your children are incredibly important to us, and I do want you to always feel the support of the school. And it's lovely to see some of the Q&As that are coming through about people sharing, you know, how much we've managed to help young people. I think it's a journey for us, and it's important that we recognise how, you know, how every young person is an individual in regards to this, and I think that came through strongly in that presentation there. You know, the work will never be done, shall we say, and nor will we ever shy away from supporting them. I just wanted to explain a couple of things really. We will stay online for a little bit of time if you want to just pop any questions through there that we haven't answered. But one or two things that came through were, what are we noticing from Ilkley Grammar School about themes that are coming through? And I think one of Nat's first slides was on there, was about how the impact of lots of different things, including social media and so on, can really exacerbate these issues for people that live in the modern world, and we've noticed that over the last number of years. And we're Ilkley Grammar School are not immune from anything at all, and we do see self-harm, we do see extreme self-harm as such, and people having suicide ideation and that sort of thing as well, which is where it's really important. And one of the parents did actually say, you know, noticing those small things, which is what V said, and I think it's the same in any safeguarding situation really, those small things, and children just, you know, noticing those small changes. If your children have always been a certain way, it's not always just to turn it around and say it's a teenage angst, because it's not like, often that it's something that they do need to get off the chest, either with yourselves or us. And that's where it's really important that we've got Lorraine and her team to support us. We do have another counsellor as well called Peter, who tends to work with boys, and he's an ex-mental health nurse, and we do get funding through that through the Ilkley Town Council. So we have a good suite of things that we can do to help. And I just want to finish really, unless anything's come up on the chat bar that I've not seen.
No, just lots of thanks.
Okay, just to finish up really, of just saying, the door is always open, shall we say. You just need to give us a call, email us through, talk to head of year, myself, or any of the rest of the pastoral team, and we will always give you our honest and unconditional support. So thank you very much, everybody. This will be recorded, so it will get published on YouTube, and I'll send a link as well. I was trying to send it through there, just if you wanted to watch the rest of Lorraine's video as well. That is actually available on YouTube, and we'll probably follow that up and just make sure that the link is available via the website if you want to watch the rest of Lorraine's talk, which obviously just gives a bit more of a flavour of that place to be. But thank you, everybody. Sally, V, Nat, anything else to say?
Nope.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening.